Welcome to another show. Today, we're going to talk about upcoming superhero movies. The future of superheroes in cinema is dependent on how these two pivotal movies will perform.
Crypto. Home. Take me home.
Herbie, how's that sauce coming?
Yeah, I'll be the judge of that.
Okay.
The upcoming Superman and Fantastic Four films, which are set to be released this summer, will probably decide the future of superhero movies. The DC Extended Universe was a mixed bag. The first film in the series was 2013's Man of Steel with Henry Cavill. It opened above box office numbers in its first week, but quickly dwindled. It had a worldwide total of $670 million, which means that it made money, but its sharp drop the second week worried investors. The critical response was lackluster, which helped the box office drop. To summarize, the critical response on Rotten Tomatoes was a paltry 56%. By contrast, the Brandon Routh Superman from before received 74% critical ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. This signaled a weak start for the DCEU, DC Extended Universe, for those who don't know. There would be no more standalone Superman movies for Henry Cavill. The only sequel we got was Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice, which fared better with a total box office of $874 million. In its first week alone, it made $422 million. But its second week drop was more than 80%. Ouch.
Are you the devil?
Maybe.
Once again, investors were worried, and the DCEU gave us Suicide Squad. With somewhat successful box office numbers, but less than 30% approval from critics. The first real success for the DC Extended Universe came with 2017's Wonder Woman, which made over $800 million worldwide and 93% critics ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. Hoping to capitalize on that success, Warner Brothers rushed Justice League into production, a film which Zack Snyder was attached to, but because his previous offerings were a mixed bag with audiences and critics, and because Snyder had to take a break because he was grieving over a death in the family and couldn't finish the job, they shooed in Joss Whedon, who of course had major success with Marvel-based movies, to complete the film and reduce its runtime. And this was the first sign that Warners were desperate to get the audiences that were going to Marvel-based films into their movies. But this didn't work. Whedon and Snyder are two totally different types of filmmakers, and Justice League suffered from the sharp contrast between the director's visions. It received a paltry 45% on Rotten Tomatoes and about $660 million worldwide gross. Again, ouch. The only other truly successful film in the DCEU was Aquaman, and this is the only film in the DCEU to make over $1 billion. The DCEU would release 5 more films, each with diminishing results, including a sequel to Wonder Woman and a sequel to Aquaman. Both of those films fared poorly at the box office. It was to the point that they shelved the Batgirl movie, which was pretty much complete except for the special effects. Now, one of those films was a James Gunn film, the second Suicide Squad movie. And this brings me to my level of concern. James Gunn is helming the new Superman movie. Again, Warner Brothers is so desperate to bring those fans who go to Marvel-based movies into their films. They see what he did with Guardians of the Galaxy and want him to repeat that magic. Marvel and DC are two totally different animals. Oh, there are some people who like both equally, but those are the exceptions, not the rule. I thought his Suicide Squad movie was fine myself, but I've always been more of a Marvel type of a guy than a DC type of a guy. And that movie was one of the biggest box office failures in superhero cinemas. Now, I do enjoy DC comics, but the only DC title I collected on a regular basis was Batman back when I collected comic books on a regular basis. Now, I want all superhero movies to succeed, but as long as movie producers make stupid decisions, like turning the Joker sequel into a musical, then more of their films will fail. Seriously, whose bright idea was it to turn the Joker sequel into a musical? I go to all superhero-based movies, even if I know they're not going to live up to expectations. And I refuse to see that movie, and I loved the first Joker movie. Who that goes to comic book-based movies also goes to musicals, and who that goes to musicals wants to go to a superhero comic book-based movie. That was one of the dumbest decisions you could ever make in superhero front. So why is Warner's betting all they have on a director who has given them one of their biggest failures so far? Again, I am cautiously optimistic, but it's going to take a lot for that film to succeed. Personally, I like what I see so far, and I love James Gunn. But is the average DC fan going to like what he does to their flagship character? That's the question. Oh, and I love that Crypto is in this movie. But again, am I the exception or the norm? We're going to have to wait and see until this summer. Now let's go to the upcoming Fantastic Four movie. Before I start, I want to state that I was a huge fan of the Fantastic Four growing up. I collected them religiously for years. I had the first 300 issues before I stopped collecting comics. And why did I stop collecting? Because before issue 250, the Fantastic Four comics were in a creative slump. Even though more than 50 issues were weak, I didn't stop reading them altogether. I stayed with the title for a couple of years. After all, they had gone into slumps before, but they would always come back strong. It wasn't until I felt that they were beyond the point of no return, at least for me, that I stopped collecting them altogether. Ever since Phase 4, Marvel-based movies have been a mixed bag, and even in Phase 3, they were mostly failures. Filmmakers have been infusing politics into their movies, leading to main characters being undermined and playing second fiddle in their own movies. A good example of this is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, with the Scarlet Witch being the main focus character in that movie. I think the real reason for the film's success has more to do with Sam Raimi's direction and visuals than the story itself. I had no sympathy for the Wanda character at all when she was willing to kill so many in order to get her way. It left me cold to her plight, and I left the film feeling kind of indifferent. Still like Doctor Strange, even though he was kind of sidestepped to a degree. Plus, in current comic book movies, all of the race swapping and gender swapping of characters in other movies for no purpose other than to, I guess, showcase diversity. Now, there are enough characters of different races and genders that no one needs to challenge or change anyone's race or gender because of your political orientation. It's to the point where the characters aren't even recognizable to comic book fans. When they were true to the source material, the MCU could not fail. When they switched characters to the point where they would be unrecognizable to the fans of the comics, that's when they began to fail. Why am I saying all of this in relation to the new Fantastic Four movie? Because of the last Fantastic Four movie from Josh Trank. Look at how that failed. The cast was mostly wrong for this film. The only character that came close to getting right was when Kate Mara played Sue Storm. Then I read that Trank didn't even want her in the movie. Sue and Johnny are biological brother and sister, but not in this film. They, again, race-swapped Johnny Storm, so they had Sue as having been adopted by Johnny's family. Now let's think about this. How many African Americans adopt white or non-African American children? Does that happen? Please point it out to me. If you know of a case that has happened, please point it out to me in the descriptions. I want constructive criticism, though, not destructive. I don't want you to swear at me or yell at me. Just point it out in the description. I ask you, please. Now, why do filmmakers need to deviate from the source material? If you stay true to the source material as accurately as possible, you will succeed. If you go off on a tangent, you will fail. Now, I want to stress, this is not a diss on the cast of the Josh Trank Fantastic Four movie. They did the job they were paid to do, but none of them reminded me of the characters they were playing. Well, except for Sue, of course. Kate Mara did remind me more of Sue, I suppose, than Jessica Alba did in the Tim Story movies. But we'll talk about that in a minute. I'll say this. Miles Teller was not the serious-minded scientist we know Reed Richards to be. Jamie Bell was not the athletic football player that Ben Grimm is. But of course, the fault is not the cast. I want to stress that again. I'm going to stress it strongly. I'm not dissing the cast in any way or shape or form. I think they're all fine actors. They were told not to read the comics in order to play the characters and whatever research they might have done. Now, is that a bright idea? That's like saying, I'm going to cast you in a movie where you're playing these astronauts, say Apollo 13, but don't read up on what any of these astronauts are supposed to be. And we all know what happened there to Josh Trank's Fantastic Four, not to mention his career as a whole since then. So will this film be any better? Did Kevin Feige learn from his past mistakes of the last few phases, or are they condemned to have a fourth failure in the Fantastic Four? I'm counting the Roger Corman one, of course. Well, let me tell you what I think so far. First, I like the way the cast looks. But I'm confused. Didn't Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness set up John Krasinski to be the new Reed Richards? What is Pedro Pascal doing here? I also like Krasinski's costume better than the ones we're getting in this film. I do like the way the Thing looks. It's the most comic book accurate version we're getting. His voice doesn't seem to be as gravelly as I would expect it to be, but that's a small detail. When I think of the Tim Story Fantastic Fours, I find them to be successful failures.
It's clobbering time!
It's catchy, right? Isn't that great?
The story and pacing in both of them was a bit uneven, but the cast was awesome. The chemistry among the actors was excellent. Chris Evans and Michael Chiklis reminded me of the old Strange Tales comics where Ben and Johnny teamed up with Reed and Sue in certain stories. That's perfect casting to me. The weakest member in the cast, to me, as I mentioned, was Jessica Alba in the first film. Well, she was way too young to be convincing as a scientist, and her maturity level wasn't up to snuff in that film. She was a bit weak. However, by the second film, I found that she had grown into the role. The box office of the first film was sufficient to warrant a sequel, but the second one underperformed, even though I loved it, and I loved the Silver Surfer. So will the new cast measure up? Oh, I wanted to mention about the second Fantastic Four film. They never really showed Galactus. And that was the disappointment. And that was the letdown. And that's why the pacing and the whole storytelling was uneven in that movie. So hopefully they're going to correct that in this movie since Galactus is actually in this one. So will the new cast measure up? I'm still having my doubts about Pedro Pascal, but the new Sue, Vanessa Kirby, is definitely mature enough to fit the bill. I just don't know enough about Ebon Moss-Bachrach or Joseph Quinn to make any type of comments just yet. Suffice to say, the look is good. Ebon reminds me more of Ben Grimm than Jamie Bell did in the Josh Trank Fantastic Four. One criticism right now is that they're having Shala Ball as the Silver Surfer instead of Norrin Radd. Why? What is the reason for this? Again, more woke politics. But I won't condemn the whole movie for that. If you want a female hero for Galactus, then create a new character. I don't know, maybe Shala Ball became the Silver Surfer in a comic after I stopped reading them, but I am not a fan. That's hopefully going to be a minor criticism of mine. I don't know. So far, I like what I see on both Superman and Fantastic Four. But those are some random thoughts on two upcoming superhero movies and the future of superhero movies, and I believe the future of superhero movies is in the balance. I want both to succeed, and I'm cautiously optimistic. Even if they fail, I'm sure we're going to get more Deadpool and Spider-Man, because those films are billion-dollar movies. Oh well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Do you think these films will succeed? Do you think they'll fail? Do you agree with my thoughts? Do you disagree with me? Let me know. Again, I'd appreciate constructive criticism, not destructive. Don't swear at me and I won't swear at you. Well, anyway, that's my show for today. As always, I'd be honored if you subscribe to my channel. Check out the Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter franchise also in the comments section. And until next time, this is Kevin Given saying, also share this video, because that'll help me grow as well. Live long and prosper. May the force be with you, and keep reaching for the stars.